Friends are always a strange group of characters, and I've always been attracted towards the stranger the better in my book.
There are movie stars everyone knows, and then there are movie stars you recognize instantly but rarely talk about. James Spader belongs to the second category. He has the face, the voice, the screen control, and the resume of a major Hollywood star, yet he never became a traditional household name in the way his talent suggested. This wasn't because he lacked opportunity, it was because he consistently chose a different path, one that prioritized complexity over likability and discomfort over mass appeal. James Spader was born in 1960 in Boston, Massachusetts, into an academically inclined family. Both of his parents were teachers, and education was a central part of his upbringing. He attended the prestigious Phillips Academy in Andover, a school known for producing future leaders, but left at the age of 17 to pursue acting. And this early decision set the tone for his career. Instead of following a safe or predictable route, Spader moved to New York City and took on various jobs to support himself while studying acting. He worked as a yoga instructor, a stable hand, and even a truck driver. These years were not about chasing fame, but about learning control, discipline, and observation, traits that would later define his performances. Spader began landing small film roles in the early 1980s, but his early visibility came through youth-oriented films where he often played wealthy, arrogant, or morally questionable characters. Movies like Pretty in Pink and Mannequin introduced him to mainstream audiences, but rarely as the hero. Instead, he became known as the polished antagonist, the smug prep school villain who spoke calmly while destabilizing everyone around him. While many actors of that era were absorbed into the Brat Pack identity, Spader existed just outside it. He had the look of an 80s star, but none of the sentimentality. Even early on, his presence felt clinical and deliberate, rather than charming or aspirational. The real turning point came in 1989 with Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape. In the film, Spader played Graham Dalton, a quiet, emotionally fractured man obsessed with videotape confessions about intimacy. The role was minimalistic on the surface, but psychologically dense, requiring restraint rather than showmanship. The performance earned Spader the Best Actor award at the Cannes Film Festival, instantly marking him as a serious actor capable of leading a film at the highest level. For most actors, this would have been the launchpad into safe, yet prestige-driven leading man roles. For Spader, it became a license to go deeper into discomfort. Instead of transitioning into conventional romantic leads or mainstream dramas, Spader leaned further into characters that explored power, obsession, and emotional control. Throughout the early 1990s, he repeatedly selected roles that made audiences uneasy. These were not villains in the traditional sense, but men whose intelligence and articulation masked something corrosive underneath. He became a defining presence in the erotic thriller genre, not because of physicality, but because of his ability to dominate scenes through voice and stillness. His characters often felt like they were one sentence away from either seduction or destruction. This phase of his career peaked with films that deliberately tested audience tolerance. In Crash, directed by David Cronenberg, Spader portrayed a man sexually aroused by car accidents, a role that was intentionally cold, analytical, and emotionally distant. The film was controversial, polarizing, and impossible to market to a broad audience. Yet Spader's performance was central to its effectiveness. He wasn't attempting to soften the material or make it palatable. He treated it like an intellectual exercise in control and obsession. This approach made him respected among filmmakers, but difficult to package as a conventional star. Around the same time, Spader briefly stepped into blockbuster territory with Stargate in 1994. The film was a major commercial success, and his role as Dr. Daniel Jackson showcased a softer, more traditionally heroic side. He was intelligent, curious, emotionally open, and accessible. It proved that Spader could carry a big-budget studio film without compromising his credibility. But instead of building on that momentum, he walked away from the franchise and returned to smaller, stranger projects. It was a clear pattern. When presented with an obvious route to mainstream stardom, he consistently declined it. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Spader's film career became quieter, not because of a lack of talent, but because the types of films he preferred were no longer dominant in Hollywood. Studios were moving towards spectacle-driven action and simplified protagonists. Spader, whose strength lay in dialogue-heavy psychological complexity, no longer fit the prevailing model of a movie star. Rather than force himself into a system that didn't suit him, he pivoted. That pivot led him to television. a medium that was beginning to transform. When Spader joined the practice in the early 2000s as attorney Alan Shore, he found a format perfectly suited to his abilities. Shore was verbose, morally flexible, manipulative, and self-aware. Spader's delivery turned monologues into weapons, blending humor with menace and empathy with self-interest. The role didn't just revive his visibility, it reframed his career. Television allowed him to be the central force without diluting his complexity. This move wasn't a downgrade, it was a recalibration. James Spader didn't disappear from Hollywood, he simply stopped chasing its loudest version of success. When the practice ended, James Spader didn't lose momentum. Instead, his character Alan Shore migrated into Boston Legal, where Spader's work reached a new level of cultural visibility. The show gave him space to fully refine what had become his signature. Long, articulate monologues delivered with absolute control. Alan Shore was brilliant, unethical, self-aware, and strangely sincere. Spader played him as a man who understood his own flaws and weaponized them. The performance earned him multiple Emmy Awards and established him as one of the most distinctive presences on television during the 2000s. What made this era important wasn't just the awards. It was proof that Spader could anchor a long-running series without simplifying his persona. Unlike many TV leads who rely on likability or relatability, Spader leaned into contradiction. Alan Shore could be compassionate in one moment and morally indefensible in the next. The audience wasn't asked to agree with him, only to listen. This was a rare kind of leading role. And Spader made it work by trusting language over action and intelligence over spectacle. Despite his television success, Spader remained selective and largely absent from the celebrity ecosystem. He avoided talk shows, red carpets, and personal branding. His public image remained minimal and controlled. While other actors used television success as a springboard back into blockbuster films, Spader showed little interest in that transition. Instead, he focused on roles that aligned with his methodical approach to acting. He treated performance less like self-expression and more like engineering, focusing on rhythm, diction, and psychological pressure. This approach reached its most mainstream expression in 2013 with The Blacklist. Spader's portrayal of Raymond Reddington reintroduced him to a new generation of viewers, many of whom had never seen his earlier work. Reddington was a master criminal who surrendered himself to the FBI, offering assistance in exchange for immunity and influence. The character was theatrical, verbose, manipulative, and unpredictable. It was a role that could have easily become cartoonish in the wrong hands. Spader grounded it by leaning into precision rather than excess. What made Reddington compelling wasn't the plot mechanics of the show, but the way Spader delivered information. He transformed exposition into performance, using pauses, inflection, and eye contact to command scenes that were often little more than conversations. The character felt dangerous, not because of physical threat, but because of his intelligence and unpredictability. Over 10 seasons, Spader carried the series almost entirely on his presence. Even critics of the show acknowledged that without him, it would not function. During this period, Spader also made a rare appearance in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the voice of Ultron in Avengers: Age of Ultron. While the role was limited to voice and motion capture, it highlighted another aspect of his appeal. Ultron was calm, articulate, and unsettling, more philosopher than brute. Spader's vocal performance gave the character a sense of superiority and detachment that separated it from standard blockbuster villains. Once again, he demonstrated that his strength lay not in scale, but in control. Despite these high-profile roles, Spader remained curiously absent from the broader celebrity conversation. He did not build a brand, chase social relevance, or attempt to redefine himself for younger audiences. He lived primarily in New York, away from the center of the Hollywood industry, and maintained a private personal life. This distance reinforced the central paradox of his career: immense influence without widespread celebrity recognition. By the time The Blacklist concluded in 2023, Spader had achieved something rare. He had sustained a decades-long career without ever conforming to the dominant trends of the industry. He was never the romantic lead of his generation, never the action hero, never the press-friendly star. Instead, he became a specialist. A performer trusted with characters that required precision, ambiguity, and intellectual weight. The reason many people feel like they don't know James Spader isn't because he lacks visibility, it's because he never positioned himself as a product. His career isn't defined by box office numbers or franchise loyalty, but by consistency of approach. Every major role he has chosen aligns with the same principles. Language matters, power dynamics matter, and discomfort is often more truthful than charm. Spader's legacy isn't about dominance, it's about authorship. He shaped a specific kind of character that now feels familiar across modern television and film, the articulate anti-hero who controls the room without raising his voice. Long before that archetype became standard, Spader was refining it in relative isolation. He didn't follow the industry, he quietly influenced it, and that is why James Spader remains one of the greatest movie stars many people have never truly recognized. Not because he failed to break through, but because he never tried to fit the definition in the first place. What ultimately separates James Spader from most actors of his generation is not a single role, award, or career phase, but the consistency of his intent. From the moment he emerged in the late 1980s, his choices reflected a refusal to be shaped by audience expectations. While many performers adjust their personas to maintain relevance, Spader allowed relevance to come to him on his own terms. This decision cost him conventional stardom, but granted him something more durable, creative control. Unlike traditional movie stars, Spader never relied on physical transformation, exaggerated emotion, or spectacle. His performances are built around voice, timing, and stillness. He uses language as the primary tool of dominance, often delivering dialogue as if he is already several steps ahead of everyone else in the room. This approach requires patience from the audience and confidence from the performer. It is not designed for mass consumption, but for precision. As a result, his work tends to age well, remaining effective long after trends shift. One of the defining features of Spader's career is how rarely he explains himself publicly. He has never attempted to reshape his image through interviews or personal narratives. He does not frame his career as a struggle or a triumph. Instead, he treats it as a series of professional decisions made in service of the work. This absence of self-mythology has made him harder to market, but it has also prevented overexposure. When Spader appears on screen, there is no off-screen persona competing for attention. This restraint has also influenced how audiences perceive him. Viewers often recognize his face immediately, but struggle to recall his name. This phenomenon is not accidental. Spader's characters are designed to be remembered, not the actor playing them. Raymond Reddington, Alan Shore, Graham Dalton, and even Ultron occupy the viewer's memory more strongly than the celebrity behind them. In an era where branding often outweighs craft, this inversion is unusual. Spader's career also challenges the assumption that movie stardom is the highest form of success. While he appeared in films throughout his career, his most influential work occurred in environments that allowed for extended character development. Television, particularly in the modern era, provided him with the space to build layered personalities over time. His success in this medium demonstrated that cultural impact does not require blockbuster status. It requires commitment to specificity. The industry's shift towards serialized storytelling worked in his favor, but only because he was already prepared for it. Spader's acting style thrives on accumulation rather than immediacy. He builds tension gradually, revealing character through repetition, variation, and contradiction. This makes his performances especially effective over long arcs, where subtle changes carry more weight than dramatic turns. Few actors maintain this level of control across hundreds of episodes without diluting their presence. Another aspect of Spader's legacy is his influence on modern character writing. The articulate, morally ambiguous anti-hero has become a staple of prestige television. But this archetype did not emerge in a vacuum. Spader's work in the 1990s and early 2000s helped normalize characters who were intelligent, unsettling, and verbally dominant without being physically imposing. This template can be seen across numerous contemporary performances, even when his name is not cited directly. Despite this influence, Spader has remained insulated from the cycles of hype and backlash that define modern celebrity. He has never been positioned as an icon of a specific generation, nor has he been subjected to the rapid reevaluation that often follows cultural overexposure. His career has unfolded at a steady pace, largely free from reinvention narratives or comeback stories. There was no fall to recover from because he never anchored his identity to public approval. By conventional standards, James Spader's career defies easy categorization. He is not a blockbuster star, not a character actor in the traditional sense, and not a media personality. He occupies a narrow but powerful space between these roles. Within that space, he has maintained relevance for over 4 decades without chasing trends or adapting to external pressures. The reason he can be described as one of the greatest movie stars you've never heard of is not rooted in obscurity, but in intention. He avoided the mechanisms that turn actors into brands. He selected roles that demanded focus rather than affection. He prioritized craft over exposure. As a result, his career reads less like a rise and fall narrative and more like a controlled experiment in longevity. James Spader did not disappear from Hollywood. He simply refused to perform celebrity in the way the industry expects. And in doing so, he built a body of work that continues to resonate quietly, powerfully, and without explanation.